Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we're talking about this week's Grandmaster Nightfall, Hypernet Current. This GM and strike as a whole is new for this season with Lightfall, and we're going to go over some build suggestions as well as overall tips to help you complete it. As mentioned in my previous video, the weekly surges are rotating between Void and Solar this season, with Strand always active. So during Hypernet's featured week, it will be Solar Surge, but maybe Void if you run it from the Gilding node during a different week this season. In terms of mod and weapon setup, you're going to want to be able to deal with Unstoppable and Overload champions in this Nightfall, so I chose to run a Scout for Unstops and a Bow for Overloads. I chose Trinity Ghoul as my bow of choice, as I felt like there was a number of places with swarms of weaker enemies that Trinity Ghoul could easily dispatch. And a Void Machine Gun Heavy works wonders in pretty much all content this season, with Volatile Flow and Bricks from Beyond coming in clutch from the artifact. There's also overcharged grenade launchers in this GM, so Wither Horde or Anarchy with that 25% damage increase are potential options. The tick damage is also nice on champions, as well as the final boss at the end, so overall I felt like they were pretty worthy options, but definitely not a necessity or anything like that. As a Warlock, Well of Radiance with Starfire Protocol is going to be a solid option, as it tends to be in pretty much all content, with both Solar and Void subclasses for all three classes as a whole being strong options for both survival and ad clear across the board. Do note that this GM has Arc Threat, so running Arc Resistance on your chest piece is helpful to help cancel out some of that extra damage you would otherwise be taking from Arc sources. I did actually prefer running one of each resist though to also get some defense against these Solar Snipers throughout, and the Void Swirly attack of the Tormentor Boss as well. As a Starfire Warlock, Ashes to Assets and Firepower are going to help you keep your supers churning, with Reaper on the class item as another orb generator. And the strongest mod in the game, at least in my opinion, Recuperation, is an auto-include for me at almost all times in PvE on my leg armor, along with the 100 resilience for the 30% damage reduction it brings from all enemies. There's been some rumors of resilience being broken, but I've yet to see this be true in anything I've ran, and when doing helps, people seem to always struggle to stay alive significantly more when running lower resiliences, so this is something that is a super simple way to make survival, and therefore completions, much easier. Now let's get into the GM itself. The starting area is pretty simple, there's just a few Solar Shielded Centurions and sporadic weaker enemies here. A few well-placed grenades, or just picking them off from a distance one by one, will make short work of them. The first main area you're dealing with is going to have two Unstoppable champions, as well as a few turrets towards the far side of the room. Staying at the close side of the room where you enter and focusing on the enemies pushing you first is going to be your best strategy, especially the two Unstoppable champions. Do note that there will be a few Vex Craniums spawning here that you can use to help kill things, or even bring them into the next section, but you definitely want to use them to your advantage when they spawn throughout this strike, as there will be multiple times that you will see these Craniums, as they do solid damage as well as build your supers up very quickly. Also, a small tip for throughout the strike, don't forget about the Shatter Orbs mod on the seasonal artifact. There's all three shield types throughout the strike, and by breaking shields with the proper damage type, you can create orbs for both you and your teammates just from breaking these shields. These orbs are big orbs too, which means that they give a larger chunk of super than most other orbs will give you, and can be extremely helpful to take advantage of. The next room is going to pit you against a Tormentor Boss, as well as a number of enemies and a few Unstoppable champions. To start, you're going to want to clear out the turrets and snipers that will be on the right side of the room. You can do this from a distance with things like scouts before pushing down, but do note that your team will be pulled with joining allies once someone pushes up. Once everything's been defeated, the Tormentor, a number of Cabal enemies, and an Unstoppable champion will spawn. My biggest tip for this area is to use the high ground to your advantage. This will allow you to be able to see the battlefield and focus on clearing the Unstoppable and other adds quickly and efficiently. Once you get the Tormentor down to around 50% HP, another set of adds and Unstoppable will spawn, so be ready for this set as well. The Tormentor is extremely tanky, but as long as you are dealing with all the enemies around it, you can just slowly plink away at it until it's been defeated. Do note that too that if anyone does go down to the Tormentor, you can have one person get the Tormentor's aggro and lead it away from the res, while your other teammate gets your teammate back in the action. The next area once you drop down the portal has 3 Unstoppable champions, 2 on the first platform right below you when you first get there, and 1 on the next platform. You're going to have a lot of space to take these on from range, or at the very least weaken them a little bit before you have to get anywhere near in a threatening range. There's a number of Taken Captain Blasters in this area, so just be keeping on a lookout for those so they don't end up taking you out when you aren't expecting it, and you will be more than fine here. The next room is full of Taken Blights as well as a number of Vex Craniums. One big tip that will come in handy for this next area is to leave 3 of these Vex Craniums for the Sparrow section, which I'll explain why here in a second. This room has a few Vex Minotaurs, which will give you these Vex Craniums when they die, some weaker Taken, and a bunch of Taken Blights as mentioned. Work your way through the room from the start to the back of the room, taking out the Blights and enemies as you go through. Once all these Blights have been shot and removed from the room, you can each take one of the Vex Craniums you left behind, and only 2 of the 3 should despawn. This will allow the 1 Vex Cranium that you still have to shoot the first Taken Blaster in the Sparrow section. By destroying this first Taken Blaster, all of the other Taken Blasters in the Sparrow section will also be destroyed, making this section significantly easier. With these blasters gone, just slowly Sparrow your way through this section, taking time to stop and kill the few Taken from the platforms before it. Do make sure to get back on your Sparrow when jumping the gaps though, as your normal Guardian jump will not be enough and cause you to be watching the rest of this section as a ghost. There will be a pull forward for anyone that does die in this section, but not until after defeating a number of overloads coming up. As mentioned, the next section will have 3 overloads with a few snipers to take out. Again, using distance and the walls around as cover to take these down will keep things moving quickly and safely. Where you're able to get anyone back up that went down in the Sparrow section will be a small bridge with some Taken Blasters and snipers. The cover is a bit suspect here too, so really be careful to take enemies down one at a time safely while standing in spots where the Taken Blasters are not shooting. This next room ahead has a few overloads and Vex Minotaurs, which will give you more Vex Craniums to use, along with more Taken Blasters. And there's also a number of weaker Taken throughout. 2 tips here in this room are to first take out any enemies on the ground, as you will be able to easily keep in cover from the overloads that are above you. And my second tip is don't be afraid to use the Vex Craniums as we mentioned for both damage and super regeneration, as more Minotaurs will spawn if you run out of Craniums without destroying all of the blasters. After destroying 50% of these blasters, Taken Ogres will spawn in the middle of the room, and you can just melt these with some of these Craniums or a few grenades and a bit of heavy, and then you can go ahead and finish off the remaining blasters. Finally, we are to the boss room. This boss has a number of threatening attacks and a decent number of ads spawn throughout the fight, but the positives are the ads spawn at very predictable paces, and the boss itself is quite squishy. When the boss fully spawns in and becomes damageable, your first set of ads and an unstoppable will spawn. You're going to want to focus the unstoppable first, and then start focusing on any and all remaining enemies. Using the pillars on the far side of the room will give you some cover from the boss itself while taking on these enemies, as well as cover from these enemies too. Nothing else will spawn in until the first health gate at 2/3 of the boss's HP. This is going to spawn in a number of Taken Blights to be shot throughout the room, along with some Vex Minotaurs and Goblins on the upper platforms. These can be killed for the Vex Craniums again to spawn, and then can be used on the other enemies to either build super up some, or along with helping you to take out the Taken Blights, of course. Also know that the boss will move further back in the room at around 50% of the Blights destroyed, so you may want to rotate to the far side of the room from it in order to have some space to deal with dodging the Taken Blasts, as well as Axion Darts that it will be shooting out at you. Once all these Blights have been destroyed, an Overload and some weaker enemies will spawn. Focus the Overload down first, while still keeping tabs on the boss's attacks, and kill any other Taken on the field. From here, you'll be able to continue doing damage to the boss until it's been brought down to 1/3 HP. At 1/3 of the boss's HP, the boss is going to go out into the open, vast area opposite of where it just was, so you're going to want to rotate back around to where it just was and where we started the encounter at. Another pile of Taken is going to spawn here, as well as Vex above that will give you more Vex Craniums. So again, don't be afraid to use supers to clear some of the ads out, and then collect your orbs and use these Vex Craniums to build supers up once again. After destroying the final Taken Blaster, your last set of ads are going to spawn in. These are going to be an unstoppable and a number of Taken here, so any supers that you have left and heavy that you have left should not be held back. Also note that any Vex Craniums you didn't use in the last section can still be used here if you did bring them over to where you're killing stuff from, so be sure to use all the tools you have at your disposal. Once everything's been defeated, your last target is the boss itself. Continue being careful for the Taken Blasts and the Axion Darts it's shooting out, but all you gotta do is shoot the boss until it's been defeated to enjoy your loot and completion of the Hypernet Current GM. I really appreciate all the support I've been receiving from you all, both on my YouTube content, as well as my stream and helps that we do over there. As much as it requires me to put in the effort, without you all, there would be no community, so thank you so much, seriously. And as always, thank you so much for watching as well, and have a wonderful day.